No problem. First, I just want to say tomorrow's June 6th, 70th anniversary of D-Day. So when you do wake up tomorrow, just kind of remember guys went ashore to liberate Europe tomorrow, 70 years ago. I'm from Services Center, I'm the vice president, and as pointed out earlier, I am now a retired naval officer, and a year ago I took over this job. I usually like to start off my presentations with a joke, and I see that some folks are kind of waiting out there, so I'll start with that. This old Marine dies, and he goes to hell, as one might suspect. So the devil's there, and the devil goes, well, what do you think, Marine? And he goes, well, devil, I gotta be honest with you, my last tour in the Marine Corps was in the Persian Gulf, and it was hot there, so, come on, what do you want? So the devil's like, man, I gotta get this guy. So the devil goes, I got it. Cranks the humidity up to 99%. So it is hot and humid, just disgusting. He says, well, what do you think now, Marine? He goes, well, devil, my first tour was in Vietnam, and they were shooting at me. And so it's just like that, but, it was worse. So the devil's like, man, I gotta get this guy. He goes, I got it. Takes the temperature, cranks it down to minus 100. Well, all that humidity freezes over. The old term is jumping up and down, yelling, the Cubs won the World Series. The Cubs won the World Series. Excuse Cubs. All right, so everyone's awake now. All right. Feel free to use that. All right.
Is there more?
No, actually I have a social worker joke. I'll use that. So, and it's a lawyer joke.
Is that one clean? Or is that
Yeah,
okay?
So, well, one nice thing is in the Navy we tell jokes all the time to stay awake on ships at night when we're up. And now that I'm sort of a social worker-ish, and I've been accused of not being one, I get to tell new jokes. So anyway, this guy's at Columbia Presbyterian. He's got congenital heart failure, and he's not going to make it. And the doctor's like, listen, man, and that's the bad news. The good news is there's a heart available. The better news is 2 hearts available. Let me tell you about each one you can pick. So he goes, well, the first one's from a lawyer, and the other one's from a social worker. The guy goes, whoa, doc, you've told me enough. I will take the one from the lawyer. And the doctor's like, what are you talking about? Don't you want to know? They do drugs, drink, whatever, lifestyle choices. And he goes, listen, lawyers don't use their hearts. I know there's some road miles left and right. And social workers, they have hearts that bleed, and I don't want one of those. Feel free to use that. Anyway, now I will move on. So, these are the programs that we run at SUS Veterans Division. A year ago, the majority of these were somewhat standalone, where now we've kind of reorganized into what I would call a task force kind of orientation, where there's like a matrix organization, people work across lines, people kind of group by function. New things that are on there is Education Employment Initiative, where we're embedded within 3 of the community colleges here in the city right now, trying to get veterans certifications that lead to employment in particular. Operation Constant Courage, we were fortunate enough to get a Wounded Warrior Project grant, and that's a suicide prevention program. Knickerbocker, although not directly run by Veterans Division, is a transitional housing unit that is for veterans. And Genesis 2, I didn't mean to have it really small with Help USA, but Genesis 2 is actually a project-based voucher program where we do the mental health and wellness under our HUD-VASH caseload, but Help USA actually owns the building for the project basic. So we're going to kind of go through each one. So all good. Anyone here in the military formally? Okay, good. So operational map, as you're supposed to have, so I get big sweepy arrows. Malik, I know you were in too. So in New York City, we operate all these programs. And in Westchester, we're doing Operation Constant Courage. In Long Island is SSVF in particular, as well as Operation Constant Courage, which is our suicide prevention program. And then hopefully we'll be in the process of expanding those operations a little bit in the coming year. So one of the things we did, you'll notice it's all color-coded. That actually tells you who pays for the billet. So, but I've organized everybody by section. And so they literally will sit next to each other. So people that do housing development, which is sort of like housing brokers, they all sit together, regardless of if HUD-VASH pays for them, which is red, Bonnie. I can see you trying to figure it out. Or the housing specialist pay. They all do the same kind of function, so it's a lot better when they're all sitting across from each other, working together. We also have some other enablers that really this doesn't really talk about, but we have a job developer courtesy of Robin Hood Foundation, so as well as they pay for the majority of what I do and a lot of our kind of pieces to kind of have the glueware. And we work in sort of this task force organization. So as a veteran comes in, we really try to wrap around all the services as best we can. And those things we don't do, we do on the outside. And this presentation, I'll gladly email anyone. So when I really think about how to do this, I had to make it for sailor resistant, right? So because I'm not really a social worker by trade. A year ago, I was still in uniform, or a little more than that. So I kind of did this Venn diagram when I first got there, and I said that what we're good at SUS is mental health and physical health, employment and housing, and all these other things though are what veterans need. So when I think of cases, Louise I see out there in the back. She does the legal stuff, but I don't need a lawyer on staff. But I know I can refer to a trusted agent in order to make that happen, or the food bank, or transportation. Here in New York City it's a lot easier, but I operate on Long Island, and the tyranny of time and distance out there is a lot different that I have to deal with. And then you go from Garden City, which is kind of like the city, to something that looks like out of Deliverance when you get towards Riverhead. See if you guys still listening. Good. All right. Yeah, I'll be here all night. The clothing, Goodwill provides free clothing. There's like a Save a Suit. There's all these sorts of organizations that do this. So we really try to wrap it around. And unfortunately, some veterans kind of fall right in the middle of that Venn diagram. They just need everything. So this is not to scale, as I like to tell people. So anyway, so on this quad chart, this is explaining the HUD-VASH program. We kind of fluctuate up to about 305 as the maximum a few months back, and it's back down about 270-ish, right, Bonnie? About 275. Yeah, it kind of depends what the day it is. Mental health and wellness, it's scattered site with the exception of really Genesis, where that's project-based. When we get the housing, when we get assigned a case, and typically what we're doing is we're trying to get the expedited way to get the housing voucher coupled with the mental health that's required. So in some cases we have what we call the Housing First Assertive Community Treatment Team, which is a cross-functional team including a psychiatric nurse practitioner that's designed to go and meet with the veteran on a very, very routine basis, in some cases daily, but certainly no less than weekly. And of course, these folks all have multiple levels of mental health issues. So we talked a little bit about HUD-VASH earlier. I like to talk about some of the success stories. So William here is an Army veteran, cancer survivor. His wife died, and then he kind of went into this spiral of drugs and alcohol. Ended up homeless through the HUD-VASH program, ended up with case management services, cleaned himself up, and now he has custody back of his children. So, great success story. Doesn't always work out that way. A lot of times, because of the way the Section 8 vouchers work, people have a tendency to stay on them for a very, very long time in perpetuity, which is not really what the program, really we want it to be, but it kind of works out that way. Any questions on this right now? Supportive service for veterans' families. This is a homeless prevention program. It's designed to either rapidly rehouse folks who end up in a shelter or prevent them from becoming homeless in the first place. Malik, you guys operate SSVF as well, and I sort of some of the other providers out there, We're trying to serve 200 families in New York City, 500 in Long Island, and it looks like we're kind of trucking along towards that. But just the idea here is that you prevent them from becoming homeless in the first place, light touch, generally less than 90 days. Sometimes we'll deal with folks much longer than that, but it's kind of onesie-twosies. The kind of great story here, and then for those of you, the gentleman on the far right there is Adam Warnock, who's floating around. He's my project manager. He's just a superstar. He's just incredible. But Stephanie, she was street homeless, living in the subway system. A lot of times female veterans here, at least in New York City, they don't want to expose their child to the shelter system, so they'll stay in the subway all night instead. Or they'll stay street homeless rather than come in from the cold, if you will. Laid off, ended up getting evicted. The outreach team found her. We were able to get her rapidly rehoused, and now she's working for Metro North, making $80K a year. So I know some of you guys are thinking, like, what am I doing wrong? But anyway, that's a great success story. But I would tell you that this is the type of success story that I think that really resonates, and why SSVF is a very powerful program. It actually is designed to give temporary financial assistance, literally paying for people's broker's fees, rent. Up to about 5 months is kind of the max end, and there's a tremendous amount of power in this. Grant per diem transition in place program. So you guys heard about grant per diem? This is a little bit different. This is designed to actually have the veteran transition in an apartment. So the young lady right next to me, Emily, thank you. You were talking about like how landlords should be just taking on veterans, right? So in this case, it's not really a HUD voucher. It's a per diem rate that's designed to get the veteran to take over the lease of the apartment they're physically in. So we have a building up, we call it Belmont because I'm Belmont up in the Bronx, as you can imagine. And there's 25 beds that are in there, and the veteran eventually takes over the lease. So we very gradually wean them off of the subsidy. It's per diem basis, $43.20 a day, regardless of whether it's Topeka, Kansas, or Bronx, New York, which is ludicrous. But anyway, that's the way the program works. We've been engaging with, in particular, Congressman Bishop in Israel's office, trying to change that. They did change it a little bit, but it's not. Unlike the HUD vouchers, it's not set up so that it's based on zip code, so it's ludicrous in that way. But it makes a ton of sense because really the veteran ends up in that successful storyline where they're not going to be in the HUD VASH program. So I think that on a personal note, this is the program that really should get people's attention. Sean is the young man here in the picture. I met him literally while riding the train coming back from the VA up at Peters. And I heard him talking to his sister about getting the flu shot, so I was like, dude, I was in the Navy 20 years, and maybe get the flu shot every year, I get sick. And he goes, oh, I was in the Army. So we started talking, right, because it's kind of the way it works. So found out he's homeless, but he's using his GI Bill to go to college in New Rochelle to get his degree in social work. And so I'm like, hey man, listen, you're gonna come to the Veterans Division. So the next day Sean comes in, and to your point, you kind of gotta see if people gel. Everyone loves Sean, and he's just like a superstar. And then we end up hiring him as intake coordinator. But some of the stuff that's stacked up against Sean is that he got kicked out of the Army on Don't Ask, Don't Tell. Which that's the way the law of the land was. But also Public Counsel, which is a legal firm, is actually helping him, is trying to make him in the test case to get DD 214s changed to not say, like in his case it says, it's got like a little code, but it says kicked out through homosexual activity, like something bizarre like that. But like, you're handing a DD 214, like really? But I don't have a lawyer, so that's why the lawyers are helping me. So it's just, Sean's awesome, I love that guy. Homeless Veteran Reintegration Program, it's an employment program. It's designed to get on-the-job training and then placement services. We've augmented this through the Robin Hood grant with a job development position, which has been very, very helpful. But it's a challenging group. A lot of times their skill sets are incredibly old. They have a GED or a high school diploma that's decades old. So the next program I'll talk about, which is education employment, is hoping to try to fix that. And then this is Robin Smith, who's actually my kind of number 2 in Veterans Division. But she was actually street homeless, HR manager for a nonprofit, I think it was Veritas, that outsourced their HR department. She was left without a job. A year later, she was street homeless. She's still in the reserves as a staff sergeant. SUS, with a lot of forethought, hired her as an employment specialist. I came in a few weeks later and then realized how awesome Robin is. And she keeps me grounded. As kind of crazy as I am, Robin's like very, very low key and keeps me kind of reined in. So, but that's supposed to be funny, you guys. But anyway, Robin, she's just absolutely fantastic, and I don't know what I would do without Robin. Veterans Residential Services, as I mentioned, we had Knickerbocker House Transitional Housing, Genesis 2, which is the project-based vouchers. The gentleman on the left in the picture is actually Fred, the guy who kind of looks like if people in mind's eye like what the Vietnam homeless vet looks like, that's Fred. Fred should be like a little picture in the dictionary next to that. But his story, for the grace of God go I, he was getting promoted, was riding his Harley on his way to his promotion ceremony. The family was following him in the minivan, got in a car wreck, everyone died. So his kind of in that kind of death spiral of his life, ended up street homeless, drug addicted, etc. And then is now in the transitional housing there. It's supposed to be like most transitional housing, no more than 2 years. Fred's been there 10. So some are more transitional than others. It's a racket, right? So anyway, but Fred's fantastic. He's just a great gentleman, and really if you go to visit Knickerbocker House, Fred will come see you, and he will make sure that you are worthy of being in Knickerbocker House. So I don't go there because I'm an officer, and he gives me a hard time. So anyway, education, employment. We're actually paying for this kind of out of hide a little bit, but we thought this was really important. What happened was that Hostos Community College approached us about this thing called the VRAP, which is Veterans Reintegration Assistance Retraining Assistance Program. It was going away, and they were having a hard time keeping veterans in school. Where I had all these federal programs like SSVF, HURP that could keep them in housing. So what we did was we hired at the time part-time case manager to go up to Hostos Community College, kind of triage the guys that were there that were the veterans, make sure all their supports were in place so that they could stay in the certification program. Because to be honest with you, I know that someone who's an Army HVAC technician that's going through the ACNR course at Hostos, at the back end, he's a lot easier to place because I know he wants to be an ACNR technician, not something completely random. So it kind of worked to our advantage as well, but I believe that this really works well because, unlike an associate's program, which can take 2 years, some of these certification programs like 6 weeks, And when you're worried about putting food on your kid's table, when you're worried about, your next rental payment, a continuing ed degree at a CUNY school is a lot better of a deal, right? So anyway, that's why we've done it. We've now expanded this to LaGuardia and BMCC, and so far so good. So we're kind of holding steady with the rate, but this has been fantastic. Operation Constant Courage, we were approached by Wounded Warrior Project, asked us to kind of come up with a straw man for how to do suicide prevention. And, there's a lot of suicide prevention programs out there, right? I mean, it just kind of, they're out there. So I said, well, what can we do that would be kind of unique? So what we did was we felt that if we looked at the VSOs, like the Veterans of Foreign Wars, the American Legion, et cetera, that have these groups of veterans that are joining a club, right? So, you would think they care about veterans issues, right? Maybe we could plug into those groups, give them training to act as kind of a first responder, geotag them like physically where they live, so that if Brett's having a bad day and Matt lives 2 blocks away, and I call into the hotline and the call goes to SUS's Operation Constant Courage, Matt can get a phone call. He's been trained to do kind of some first responder stuff. He goes over to Brett's house, make sure, hey man, let's have a cup of coffee, make sure there's no sharp objects, that sort of thing. And then in the meantime, SUS is sending the team up. A high sign? 5 minutes, okay. Yeah, okay. So we're using the new updated checklist. One of the stories we have is Josh was a Marine Corps reservist, lived way upstate. Wasn't willing to tell us where he lived. We actually figured he had a criminal record, so that's kind of what started this kind of idea. But we ended up calling the police department. They got involved. There was a rainstorm coming through. He thought it was the SWAT team coming. I mean, it did not go well. He's okay. He lived. He killed up. But I did make Channel 12 News. But that kind of was like, that's the worst case scenario for us. So we actually use that as the model, like how would we beat this in the future without calling the state police. So anyway, that ends it.
Let's take a couple questions. We got like 3 minutes. Anybody have any questions out there?
I know in between you and the...
Yeah, but Ben was going to use that one. So, yeah.
Oh, man, cool.
Okay, so let's give our speakers a round of applause. We'll hang out for a little bit. Thank you for coming. If you have any questions, come on up to the panel.
Yeah, all right, guys, thanks. Hey, let me give you my card back before you bounce. Oh, thanks. Thanks so much. Hi, man. Oh, yeah, hi, Renee. Oh, thanks so much. Oh, good to see you. Sorry, I missed your opening. We're doing some work with the Veterans Outreach Center in Rochester.
Come by soon before we get to the stuff.
You're all the way upstate.
All the way upstate.
Rochester, Finger Lakes,
Yeah. You're like me.
Hi, I'm Kristen McIntosh. I work at SAU with Heidi and Steve.
Yes.
I wanted to
Finally, nice to see you face to face.
to see you.
Is Heidi here? I haven't
She
seen
was
her.
here,
Okay.
but she actually had to run out.
It's actually, I didn't have her cell phone. I wasn't going to call my secretary to grab it, just to ring her up and say, if you're here, where are you?
Right, yeah, she had to take off right after lunch. I mean, this is a great presentation. It's really wonderful.
Yeah, well, say hi to Heidi and the rest of the gang for me.